like I said, we have some fun stuff to go through today. Salvage is one of the longest running game features that they've talked about. I figured we go through the history of it. As always, we take a look at all the videos where they've talked about salvage in any major way. We're looking at salvage attachments, salvaging drones, salvage charges and detonations, finally leading up to the salvage that we do know and where we are today. Let's start this out with our first little peek into salvage. This is like 8 years ago. Probably not our first peek, all right? This is, I think, the first substantial look, but they've talked about it probably prior to this. Actually comes in the ship repair and maintenance little thingy-majig. So if you scroll down, you can see that like some of this stuff does look pretty similar to salvage and whatnot. Interestingly, they get very deep into this, materials and stuff. Talking here about repairs taking place in a workshop require the consumption of the raw construction materials gathered through mining, scavenging, and trade. So like that would be part of the economy, right? You have to make sure that there are enough minerals being mined and sent to refineries, which then turn them into metals, which then get cargo hauled to, I guess, repair stations. Like that would be a cargo mission. That's, you know, that's kind of how they sell the idea. The repair task manager can assign different materials according to the repair task at hand via their console's material panel. So yeah, they got really deep in with like materials and how they would affect your ship. Don't rule it out that they still get to this level. I don't know where they would fit this in. Generally, these kinds of documents that they had from this time back in the day, they would go into a bunch of details and those details find a way into the gameplay, just not in the way that they lay out here. So then there's reconstruction, yada, yada, yada. We get down here to the repair arm operator, and they have here stripping. Yay. Don't judge it. Everybody's got to do something to make money. Hull stripping is vital for improving the integrity of a ship's hull that has only sustained light damage, as only missing segments can be patched. In stripping mode, the repair arm's high-powered laser is used to cleanly remove parts of a component's surface without causing structural damage to the surrounding area. Stripped surfaces are converted and collected as a percentage of its raw materials. Stripping is also necessary when a component or part has been completely detached. Full component reconstruction requires a clean attachment point, requiring the operator to cut away any debris that compromises the area. So this obviously is what happened. This is what I was talking about. Hull stripping is here kind of more related to repair, and it ended up being put into salvage. So sometimes these details just find a different way into the game. But this was the first time we heard about the real, I guess, scope of what they wanted to do with salvage. And there's more stuff here, you know, putting on an actual part, making the frame and making sure like you have an attachment point, cutting off the edges that are kind of irregular. There's a lot of stuff on this document that goes into this. And down here they talk about components, subcomponents, and stuff like that. That's stuff that we've seen from engineering. So again, it is on the ship repair and maintenance section, not the engineering section. I guess ship maintenance is basically engineering. And here it is, talked about in 2015. People will say that like this stuff is feature creep when it ends up popping up in some ISC or something somewhere, and you go back and find these documents and usually they have something about it. So that is our first look at salvage. Next up, we've got some talk about, I believe this is about salvaging drones. This is from a while ago, 2018. This was with the release of the concept for the Vulcan, a ship we still don't have, but I really, really want. Hold on, we can look it up real quick. So it's got these drones on it. You can see my camera is like kind of in the way. This like drone here that's attached to the Eclipse is one of the drones from the Vulcan. You can see another one of them right here. There he is. Cute little guy. And these drones are packaged up in the Vulcan. So you can see they've got like a whole compartment in here. And they're meant to like, it's meant to launch drones out. So you're in here, you change out the equipment on your drones. You have these like two kind of airlock doors where you can go in, change the equipment on the drones, whether they're repairing, rearming, refueling, maybe even like a salvage laser. I don't know what they could put on there, but you're supposed to change out the drone equipment, put it in the door, the drones launch out of the ship, and they go and they resupply or rearm or repair another ship. So this is like a really cool ship. It's got a cool size to it. It's like 30 meters, I think, or 20 something meters long. So it's like a cool 2-person kind of size ship where you could probably make a lot of money together. And it does a really cool, unique job. So that's the introduction of drones and what they're going to be talking about here in the context of salvage.
So they do look similar, but they do perform different functions. Like the reclaimer ones are there for salvage, cutting stuff up, and which is not useful for a repair ship.
No. Now, indirectly,
got to cut out the bad.
You got to cut off the rotten flesh.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the questions that was in the Spectrum thread and voted up: if the drones are different, can they be swapped? Can we take the salvage drones from the reclaimer and put them in the Vulcan? Can we take the refueling, repairing, rearming drones and put them on the reclaimer if they're made from the same manufacturer?
I would imagine you can, but the usability of them takes a severe dent. Like naturally, the Vulcan has the sort of the ability to pipe fuel.
Yeah.
So the reclaimer doesn't have that. So you could probably take the salvage drone out of the reclaimer and put it in Vulcan, and it's all self-contained, so it's fine. They can carry stuff fine, but some of the more specialized functions,
because if you've got a fuel line from the tank underneath to the drone, so you can fuel the drone up before sending it out, you could potentially have a salvage drone that takes fuel from wrecked ships and brings it back, and then tops back up your tank. So you could potentially see a way where you would have a salvage drone useful as one of the 4.
They don't explicitly say it, but that's like one of the we'll see later on in this little deep dive we're doing. That's one form of salvaging is siphoning out fuel. That was some salvage information, mainly about drones and interusability, not huge details. This is going to be a lot more. Here we're going to listen to a little bit of talk about the Drake Vulture. This is actually the introduction of this ship. So I thought it'd be kind of cool for us to do, while we're looking at the future of salvage, also kind of look at what they were saying way back when. The very beginning, when they first were introducing this ship. How did they say it would work? What were the selling points? Are they still there? Have they changed their messaging? Why don't we look and find out?
The Vulture is a single-person ship, so it's designed for the solo player. Players that want to get into the salvage career, that's what it's built around. That is its sole purpose. The inspiration for the ship was from the Dragonfly. You have 2 arms on Dragonfly. You see them as well on the Vulture. However, this time...
All right, so it still continues to be, I think, an ongoing debate as to
2 arms
whether it was
Dragonfly.
actually a Dragonfly inspired design, or if it was the Vulture from Eve design. I think the design itself is probably fairly common, not like a crazy design, a 3-piece ship. It certainly does look like a single section of this. It certainly does look like the Vulture. Overall, though, I would say it's its own ship because, honestly, the general shape language of a ship is one thing, but these ships are super detailed. They have their own interiors. They have all these little gimmicks that they need to be workable with a player. So, like, at the end of the day, design and shape is one thing, but the full-on details of a ship, I think, are what really define it. And all 3 of these are quite different when it comes to that regard.
However, this time they have a different purpose, which is dragging in salvage, processing it. Got a little bit of cargo space to store all the processed salvage or other cargo if you wish. It's designed to sort of sneak in, do a bit of salvage work, process that, and move on to the next place rather than something like the Reclaimer, which is just a huge target. But obviously the size of it is, you can't take this little ship up to an Idris and expect to just chomp it like something like the Reclaimer can do. So to give you a quick overview of how the salvage process will work, hopefully. You'll be flying along in your Vulture, you've got great visibility, there's very minimal cockpit struts or screens getting in your way when you're flying around. You'll scan for things you want to salvage, just like you'll be scanning for mining. You come alongside, you've got to then decide whether you want to do like a complete salvage, that is taking all the weapons and ordnance off. So if that's the case, EVA out, carry those items back off the ship, put them in your cargo hold for safekeeping and selling later, get back in your ship. Then it's a process of scraping the hull with the scraper beams to sort of strip the surface off. That all gets processed into commodity. Then it's salvage charges to break apart the hull more. So essentially the ship cuts up the panels of the wrecks, it drags them in while processing, and then it goes into the second processing stage inside of the ship, where it all gets packed into cubes, just like combine harvesters. At the end, you get a cube of salvage rather than a cube of hay. Depending on the size of what you want to salvage, it can be quite a time-consuming process. If you're there in the Vulture trying to take apart a Starfarer, it's going to take a long time, but you'll probably do it eventually. But it would be better if you had a Reclaimer or some friends in Vultures to help you do that. Smaller ships like Gladius is probably not worth a Reclaimer's time to go and munch that up, but a Vulture is something that will get a lot of return.
We're hoping that it'll be a really good experience for the player, you know, but it'll be the wide range, won't it? You know, in Star Citizen, you're just surrounded by black space, and you come across.
He's so quiet.
I can't imagine it being sort of a clean thing. There's just going to be chaos going on in front of you, and you're there just stripping metal, pulling bits off.
Okay, so that was back in 2018, June 2018. They definitely, all of that is stuff that we've seen, and you will continue to hear this recurring theme of salvage charges throughout all today, which I think must mean that tomorrow, when we start seeing hull munching, in some way salvage charges must be included, because I think it's probably, yeah, in this video, you're going to hear them talk about salvage charges like 3 different times. Yeah, it's actually right now. So it's definitely going to be in there in some way. Let's listen in more about how that's going to work.
The salvage charges. Are the salvage charges something that's actually like manufactured on the Vulture? Is it something the Vulture can make and then you take them out? Or is it something that you have to stock up, you know, before you go out? What can you tell us about the salvage charges?
They're just essentially ammunition that you stock up on before you go out somewhere. So they're just loaded in. It sort of gives you a fixed amount of stuff you can do. So you have to pick your battles, so to speak, but it's not such a small amount that it's one ship and that's your lot. You have to sort of, you're not going to be able to go there and chop up 30 Idrises with a Vulture's worth of, you probably need more salvage charges than could physically fit in the Vulture to do that.
Why would you want to use a salvage charge instead of just shooting the ship and trying to break it apart into bigger pieces?
So salvage charges do it cleanly, the same as the claw on the Reclaimer. The claw does the salvage charges job for the Reclaimer, but the Vulture doesn't have that, so it has this and sort of
Okay, that's a big detail, right? If salvage charges are meant to replace the claw, then we can probably assume both those things would be working with hull munching. That's the way I see it. I think hull munching is the only form of salvage that they've talked about that would require the claw. So if the salvage charges are equivalent, that means that the claw is likely, or the salvage charges are likely going to be a form of, or part of the hull munching.
EVA salvage will use those as well, rather than you just like with a tiny little claw cropping away at stuff. It's the clean way of doing it, so it cuts down those breakpoints. If you're shooting it with your ship, you're going to be causing damage to the ship. You're going to be destroying the surface of the ship. So when you're scraping it, you're going to be getting much less returns. The penetration of the weapons probably will be damaging stuff on the inside. When bits break off because you've shot them, they're probably going to cause little mini explosions. You see all the squibs go down the wings when it's all just deteriorating your return. So yes, you can go along and shoot it with your ship, but it's not going to be as good a return as just doing it properly with salvage charges.
Gotcha. And the first question that came in from the live chat was about how can we salvage something that's larger than a Vulture? I'm assuming the salvage charges play a big part in that.
Yeah, so those break it down into the bite-sized chunks that the Vulture can manage.
Salvage charges. Does the advent of salvage charge mean that we can salvage without the use of something like the Vulture or the reclaimer? Can we take salvage charges out in the back of our freelancer and then use them and bring stuff back to the freelancer?
So in theory, yes. They obviously enable you to start splitting bits off ships. So there's nothing to stop you using them to do that. If you've got a way of getting those bits back into your hull, there's nothing to stop you doing that either. Where it all sort of starts falling apart is when you come to go sell those bits. So if in a salvage ship, it's all been nicely processed, maybe it's been refined, depending on the ship, maybe it hasn't. So that dictates the value and where you're going to sells it. If you rock up in your freelancer with, oh, hey, I've got the tail fin of a Hornet here.
Yeah.
Unprocessed, damaged. If we give you the ability to sell that, it's going to be nowhere near the effectiveness of turning up in your Vulture with, hey, I've got 12 SEU of processed Hornets. Give me all the money.
Yeah, because I don't know in the concept art, like in the stuff that'll be released like today, if we actually, we don't really show the interior of the cargo hold, but we have basically figured it all out, and there is basically, there's the nod to the reclaimer where you can actually see inside all the processing equipment, and then basically it all gets
compacted. It's like a big
processed and compacted into a box, and basically it pops out a box ready for you to just go and sell, essentially.
The reclaimer sort of, we're not quite sure how the reclaimer is going to fill up its hold, whether it's going to use a similar bigger version of that, or whether it's just going to be raw cubes of compressed metal. But there's the ability to have those two different states of, here's processed metal in a box, easy, nice, ready to go, ready to sell, or where there's just like the raw scrap compressed in a box. Like, you take that to a manufacturing plant, or you can perhaps sell it to a refinery, or you can get your reclaimer to even process it more into those boxes. So you have the options there to change the output.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that was, I mean, just a little bit of like, I guess, can you salvage without a salvage ship, which we already know you can. And they were talking about this. When was this? This is also 2018. So they were going over that pretty consistently as well, that you can salvage without a salvage ship, but it won't be as easy. We're going to hear a lot about salvage in this video, like a lot. They will tell us some pretty useful details. This is May 29th, 2020. This is kind of where you get an idea of the 4 different segments of salvage, which are siphoning, stripping, munching, and component retrieval. So I think that happens later in this video, but for the beginning, we will start by talking to Todd Pappy. As you know, we always get some good info when we talk to Todd. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Spoke very clearly in the question thread, so we're going to tackle this one head on. We're going to talk about salvage and a couple game systems that are related to salvage, involved in salvage, twisted up inside salvage. We're going to start the conversation off where most things design related start with our own Todd Pappy. Todd, how you doing, man?
Hello, sir. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you for talking to me from your palatial office.
Yeah, the camera adds some depth to it.
You have to read YouTube comments to get that joke, and we don't recommend it. All right, so Todd, let's talk about salvage here. Let's talk about the basics. How do we see overall? How do we see salvage working in the persistent universe?
We really break it down into 4 different types. So there's hull scraping, which would be actually removing hull, or basically the paint up the hull. Then there's components, basically salvaging, taking out the components that are placed actually within the objects, so coolers, power plants, computers, so on and so forth. Then there's the maw, which would be actually crunching up the ships and disposing of them that way. And then there's actually siphoning of different oxygen or fuel data.
Gotcha. We've talked about some of those aspects before. The hull scraping is like the inverse of repair. The last time we talked about it, like a repair beam would be shot at the ship and like put it back together, and then a hull scraping would be the reverse.
Yeah, think of it almost like you're applying Bondo, you're taking away Bondo, for like car repairs and stuff like that.
Okay. And then a component retrieval, it's like FPS. You fly over, you go inside the wreck, you pull the components. Maw, I'm guessing, is the reclaimer, is something like the reclaimer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Siphoning was the one that I'm not familiar with. Talk to me a little bit more about siphoning. Siphoning what?
Well, I mean, for example, we have tanks, so like quantum fuel tanks, hydrogen fuel tanks. Obviously, in the future, we'll have data associated with computers, and so if you scan something, then think of it like a hard drive. You're taking information off of a hard drive. So, or you're siphoning out oxygen, or you're siphoning out, basically fuel. So then, you find these wrecks, and to me, oxygen is going to be, oxygen and water are going to be one of the two, kind of most useful things in space. So
make it all over again.
Right. So then you want to take those, and so then in the future, you're not having to pay for these things, or you can get them for free, then why not?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I understand that, all of these,
Okay. A little bit of data news there. That was kind of cool. So I never considered that data would also be something that's there, but that also makes it sound more of an immersive sim kind of style than a regular arcadey game style, in the sense that he's saying, rather than adding a mechanic where you press a button and salvage all the stuff, if it happens to be a ship that has data on board, there should be a way to take that off, whether the ship is active and running or it is a derelict that you might be salvaging. Same goes for oxygen, water, fuel. So that'd be cool then to know maybe if there's a specialized ship that's needed for that. Because what if you have a freelancer max, tons of fuel, you come across a Gladius, ran out of fuel? Could you technically siphon the fuel from the max into the Gladius because your friend is just giving you some fuel? Or do you need a specialized ship to go and do the refueling yourself? I like the first option because that's I think a little more freeform, gives people more freedom, and it's how they've done a lot of the stuff so far. Like they were saying with salvaging, you don't need the ship, you just need the tools that need to be able to blow that stuff up to separate it. Let's continue on with this one though.
Different aspects of salvaging, they all have a number of prerequisites, things that are being worked on right now that will make salvaging possible. Talk to us about some of the prerequisites that are being worked on right now.
Well, so for hull scraping, we've got the damage that Ali had done a long time ago, and there's some persistence that would need to be done with that, in order to make sure that we're spawning the ships the way that we need to spawn them, and because right now we don't save out all of that information, so there would need to be some thought process work done on that. For the hull scraping, obviously we need to create the weapons or items that you can use to actually scrape, and then...
Sorry, that's actually a really good point. He just pointed out that persistence was a big thing for getting hull scraping in, and that proved out with 318. We saw persistence kind of be packaged up with hull scraping, and they both came at the same time.
For component retrieval, it's actually getting the items in, getting them placed within ships, getting power running, getting pipes working the way that we need it to work, so that you can take it out of ships, but at the same time, when you're actually in the ship, you have the multi-crew gameplay of actually removing those items or switching them out on the fly if you're flying around, or even if you're in battle. The law, that one to me is going to be based off of the way that we break up our ships anyways, and kind of then figuring out, do we need to have smaller detonators on those to blow up those things and then create different shards, or Like there just needs to be some real thought gone into the maw and how we're going to crunch things up and get that. And then siphoning, it's basically at that point in time making sure the room system's working the way that we need it to work, so that we can actually pull things out. Making sure that we can actually put things in too, so getting our life support working the way that we need it to work. For the fuel and those tanks, it's basically just making sure that we have a entry point so that we can actually pull things out.
And I understand a couple of those things are...
So that's, like, we've got a lot of that stuff. We got the damage system, we got persistence for the hull scraping. Obviously with the hull munching, we're getting a prototype shown of that tomorrow. What was the other thing he just said? Oh, we've got life support undergoing work right now. We've seen that in the works with engineering gameplay, so that would be air. With fuel, we saw refueling come in the game, so they started adding fuel ports to all ships, so we got that. We don't have water mechanics of any sort in the ship itself. We don't know anything about that. And then we've also seen, obviously, with the tractor beam, the ability to remove components. So we actually are really, we're very advanced when it comes to salvage gameplay. With mining having their components, with the gadgets, subcomponents, components, different refining styles, I guess you could say. And then probably within a year and a half, I would say it sounds like we'll have hull munching of some sort, granted whatever we find out tomorrow. And then possibly some form of siphoning when engineering gameplay comes in and life support's actually working. We could see both of the largest industrial gameplay loops pretty advanced by the end of next year.
Actually being worked on right now. The we've talked about the conversion to the physicalized components and everything before, and we're going to talk to John Crew after you about where that's at and how that's going. But power would also be a prerequisite. And I understand that we're working on our revamp of power system right now as well.
Well, yeah, it's basically we got power system to a certain point, and it was workable for so long, but now that we're really getting into the multi-crew ships and getting into that thought process, there's fundamental things that just need to be finished off in order to make sure that it will work right. So that's, let's say, a power plant, or a fuse in the shift goes down, a player needs to go and replace it. But so we need to get that working. We have pipes where power runs anyways, and we have that, but we also don't have, in all the ships, we don't have the physicalized components. And so that's one of the major factors that we're going into doing right now. Then with the power,
again, this is when people say it's always talk and they don't actually ever show anything. This is literally 2020, all talk, right? Just talking about what they need to do to get this done. They did it. 319, physicalized components. Not all ships have them, but this stuff is starting to be done in the game in much better ways than it used to be. A lot of the stuff we're seeing just this year now has been in the making since all the way back then with all this talking. So yeah, I think it's important to, like, we complain a lot about them saying these things from way back then and they're still not being in game. I think it's important to also point out when they've said these things and stayed consistent with the messaging and gotten it to us in the way that they said it needed to be done, because that kind of proves out that when they do come out and say, hey, this is a prerequisite for this, we need to get it done, we can at least rely on the fact that, yeah, maybe once we see that prerequisite done, we'll start to see something else that we've been expecting. So I like that when I hear this kind of stuff.
In the way that it needs to. We're making sure that it works in ships, but also in environments. So like space stations or even, on the planet in our outposts and items like that. So that, it's just one cohesive system. When you understand, oh, that's a power plant. If I take that away, then things turn off. We want that to be very, very clear.
Gotcha. Well, I think we're going to put a call into John and Dan and talk a little bit more about the current work on the power system, the current work on the ship component system. Is it okay if I call you back if I have any more questions when I'm done with them?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Maybe I'll see you in a few minutes. Take care, man.
Cool. Later.
We know that vehicle components are an integral part of the the component retrieval aspect of salvage. So tell us where we're at. We've been hearing about this for a while now.
Yeah, so lots of bits in motion on the vehicle content side and the vehicle feature side. First up, the props team have been working on all the components, so you'll have seen them in all the shops. So there's literally hundreds of vehicle items being made or have already been made, and they're just doing the work to make them all fully release ready, because obviously it's one thing seeing them in the shop, it's another thing seeing them all embedded in the vehicles. On the actual vehicle content side, any vehicle that has been released in the last 18 months, 2 years, players will have noticed that they have all these hatches and component cupboards, for lack of a better word, popping up in their ships. So we build them in at production point now, or concept phase, so we know where they all go. And then we're going, at the same time, we're going back through the older ships. Like, I think one of the first ones we went back to was the Retaliator, to carve out the spaces for them in the geometry. So if you look at the Retaliator now, you see all these items in the ship. So as props is one bit, the vehicle content is the other, and then the last bit is the engineering side. So at the moment, if you see a component in a ship, take the Retaliator for example, those are not the actual items, they're just brushes placed in there to validate that the space is all correct, it's all going to work, you've got enough access to it. Some ships, such as the Carrack, actually, when you open some of the hatches, they do have items in there. Those aren't brushes, they're the actual items attached to your ship. But because of various limitations that I'll get onto in a second, those are actually attached to the exterior of the vehicle, because that's just how all our systems work currently. So whilst they're inside the ship, they're actually outside the ship. And when you're inside the ship, you can't interact with anything outside the ship and vice versa. So we solve that. So scheduled for next quarter, the vehicle tech team are going to be working on a way to place those items physically inside the object containers of the ships, and then they will all automatically link up to all the external systems we need. And that will allow you to change your items inside the ship, see them visually change, and actually all be hooked up, which is, of course, a precursor to salvaging, because you need to salvage stuff that is inside the ships. So those are the three big areas that are sort of in progress on our side.
That is, and that's again what we've been seeing in 3.19. Not all ships have access to that though, and that's one of the big problems with Star Citizen is once they get these things online, then they have to go through and add it to all the ships. Tech debt, it hurts. But like, that was a big problem. Here, clearly it was a very big hurdle that they had to get over, and they finally gotten it fixed. So I'm happy to see that. I think that was the bigger deal when they added 3.19 and they showed off physicalized components. I still think that it was a little bit overlooked how big of a deal that was, that it was finally working. But as you can see here, back in 2020, they were still trying to get it done, and it took 3 more years for us to finally see it happening in game.
Without putting a date on it or a time on it, I want to see maybe lay out the salvage roadmap for us. What's how do we see this going forward?
So right now, we're working on power, and we're basically getting that working the way that it's supposed to be working, so it's scalable. And then from there, we're working on getting all items placed in the ships, and obviously with our catalog of ships, that takes a while. So those things are being worked on in tandem right now. And then from there, we'll figure out, okay, this with hull scraping, when do we start off? And kind of work through a lot of those things. So with that, those have always been kind of in Chris's mind, my mind, Tony's mind, so really the first, ideas of what salvage is. So then it'll just be, okay, do we want to release the components, aspect first, or do we want to, release hull scraping, with the components, and say that is salvage as a whole. But no matter what, I think it'll just be us figuring out, okay, hey, here, this is our base salvage, and then we'll continue to iterate on it, much like we did with mining, where we put out, an idea of, hey, this is salvage, or this is mining, and then we introduce FPS mining. Then from there, we've done other adjustments to like all its lining, so on and so forth. So you'll be kind of following the same cadence or Salvage will be following the same cadence that we've done in mine.
Cool. So this sounds like a lot of dependencies, but things are in motion right now then.
Yeah, we are working on aspects of it, but
Dependencies.
It's just saying, okay, hey, that team is fully focused on it. No, that team is fully focused right now on basically getting power working the way that.
All right, Todd, thank you so much, man. We'll let you go.
Thanks, dude. All right, so that was, I mean, we basically have seen that roll out as has been said. That wasn't a bunch of new information, but a little review of how they want to keep going about it. Add on that first base layer, which was hull scraping, and then go from there. This is just a little update on the salvaging attachment.
Also has two functions. It has salvage and repair. Salvaging allows you to do what we call hull stripping, which is where you can walk up to a ship or vehicle and you can start stripping away the hull that then gets stored in a canister. And that could either be sold on or kept for repair. And what repair is, it's essentially the reverse. If you look at your ship that's been damaged, you can apply what is in the canister, the material that you've gathered in the canister, to any damage that's been done to your ship or vehicle to repair it.
And the obvious visual thing with this is Nick delivered in yellow originally, but we've pushed him to more the silvery blue. If you find one or you're in a shop, you're like, okay, that's what I need. A pick. There's no confusion.
So that was a very small update. Here we have some more talk about salvage. I'm not really sure what this is going to have. My memory fails me now, but I'm guessing it'll be some interesting details as this is a newer video.
They are working on repair as a counterpoint to salvage. It's not quite where Dan's team is. It's a little earlier in the process. So why don't you go ahead and tell us where it is, where we're going, what considerations you guys are currently investigating right now, and just give us what you got about repair.
Sure thing. So yeah, and like you say, we're in earlier stages at the moment. We're still firming up on the design, so everything I say here might not make it to when it actually arrives in the PU. But yeah, essentially salvage and repair. It's the kind of like the first version of salvage that we're actually doing. So what we're calling it internally is it's more like hull stripping. So you're actually going up to ships and vehicles and you're either stripping away parts of the hull, which lowers its health, it's like its integrity essentially. Visually as well, because it uses the V2 damage map, or that's what we're intending to do. Basically burns it away, takes that material away and stores it in the canister, even if that's on the, the multi-tool has a material canister, and the larger dedicated salvage tool that we're going to be doing has an even bigger one, so you can store even more of that stuff. And basically, yeah, you can either strip away from the hull, or you can use that material, or you can buy full canisters of material to come and use that as a repair resource as well. So if your ship takes a few hits in combat, you'll be able to pop out cockpit, EVA over to it, get your repair tool out, and kind of fill it in. If you come across, the idea is at least if you come across something like a derelict and your ship's damaged and you don't have any repair resource, you could strip away some of that ship and spray it onto yours. So it's not going to be 100% like, oh, I've just, sprayed this magical, metal substance into the ship again, and it looks like it's brand new. It's going to look a little bit more battle scarred, and the idea is we want to use a different material on that to show, like, look, you patched this up yourself. It doesn't look like a pristine ship anymore. If you want it to go back to its pristine state and 100% health again, then you're going to have to take it back to a shop to get someone to properly repair it for you.
Interesting. So a little bit to unpack there. So repair is intrinsically tied with salvage. It is basically salvage is one mode, and then you flip the darn thing into reverse and you're in repair in the other mode. But you said something interesting, that when you repair your ship, when you run your salvage beam, either from the multi-tool or from the dedicated tool, and we showed some of the dedicated tools recently on ISE, you were there. When you run it past, it doesn't restore your paint job and everything. It's going to be some like third transient state, because we got our pristine ship with its paint intact, and then we've got the damaged ship, as it degrades, wears and tears, whatever happens to the ship, that takes it to the stress point up to when it's about to explode. But then salvage can bring it back, or not salvage, repair can bring it back not just to where it was originally, but to some other third state where it's kind of like unpainted metal or so? Well, that's part of what we're exploring right now.
Yeah. So there's a lot of technical considerations that I don't want to write checks for at the moment, because we have to talk with the graphics team, we have to talk with a bunch of different people to make sure that that system will work. But that is what we want to do from design side, if we can, because it does give you that nice visual feedback of, like, you know, I've been through a few battles, I've had a few scrapes, and I've patched it up myself because I want to keep going while I'm out. I don't want to go back to a landing zone or anything to get fixed up. So yeah, it does give you those, like, it feels cool, right? Like, I've been flying around for a while, like I've taken a few hits, but I've scraped through and I'm patching out myself. It looks, I think it'll make a few ships look, you know, battle scarred and awesome. And it also kind of ties into the fact that you might not necessarily be able to restore that part back to its full health again unless you go and either get a replacement for it or you go and get the proper repairs for it as well. So it gives you visual feedback on both sides. Like, I've been out and about and had some scrapes, and also this is a little bit weaker than it was to start with.
Gotcha. So what makes now the time to get into this? Because we've talked about repair, I mean, since the beginning of the project, and we carry a lot of ideas forth with us throughout the years. You can go back through Wingman's hangars and old ATVs and see many of Chris's comments on it throughout the years. But what makes now the time to actually buckle down and start, you know, putting things on paper and start actually pushing the process forward?
Well, to be honest, it's been a long time coming, and it's a system that's basically been needed. And the more persistence that we get inside the PU, and the more we want you to be kind of, well, we've got the health system coming in for starters soon, which obviously makes you care about everything you've got, and taking care of all of your items, you know, a lot more important, because it's all persistent.
Nope.
So
I don't take any better care about my items. We brought in that system, and I just die more.
If you do get into a few scrapes in the PU, you're not going to just want to, you know, abandon your ship and, you know, die on a planet somewhere. You're going to want to have an option to be able to repair it and, you know, fly out of there. So I think it all just ties into all of the other systems that are coming into the game at the moment, and the fact that it's a system that's been looming for a long time, and this is the starting point for it. Obviously, it expands out when we start looking at ship salvage. There'll be similar systems there where you might be able to use, you know, hull scraping lasers to take that stuff off, but then there's things like the reclaimer with the claw, and you just kind of progress from what we're doing down here all the way up to that. So yeah, this is a really good starting point,
which we will see tomorrow,
for us to just start, you know, noodling around with, playing with, seeing what works, what doesn't, and then, you know, go from there.
I have to imagine you're also in a similar situation to refueling, in that the pyro system's coming and there are fewer rest stops, fewer repair stations along the way, and you're going to need more options to maintain your own ship, because you're not going to have an easy stop-off point to instigate repairs like you have in the stand system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot more remote and barren, isn't it? And, you know, you're going to want to be able to be a bit more self-sufficient than you can be at the moment. So yeah, and I think it even ties into a few things that we want to do down the line too, because we've not even mentioned where we want to take this beyond the hull stripping. Is like, eventually we want to be able to, when we get the physicalized ship items inside the ships too, we want this to be able to tie in with that as well. So if someone does target your power plant or whatever and take it out, and you end up just about managing to land your ship somewhere, you want to be able to repair that power plant back up, rather than, you know, being completely stranded because you've got no power plant left. So eventually that's to come later. That's probably not going to be in our Tier 0 release, but later down the line, that's certainly something we want to do too. And it does tie into that whole self-sufficiency thing.
So where do you go from here? It's obviously don't put like a date. Yeah, we're going to have repair on December or whatever. but what's the process like from here, from here forward?
So where we're at in terms of from a design point of view?
Yeah, like in the overall pipeline. And if you imagine the overall getting repair into the game pipeline, where are we at in this pipeline? What's still left to do?
So we're still early. We've got the design stubbed out on paper, which we've been going through with game directors like Rich Tyra. So we've been working on that with him. We've been trying to come up with what we call a functional design as well, which is essentially a fancy name for basically working out the numbers in Excel for a first, you know, bounce pass on, the stripping rates and stuff, and how it degrades the health on ships and everything. So we're just working all of the details out at the moment. There are other teams that we're obviously very dependent on to get this working. So we've been talking to the graphics team, network team, because obviously I've drilled a hole in my ship with my salvage tool, we want that shown over the network, and that comes with its own problems. So there are a lot of things to factor in. And then it also comes down to things like we've been in contact with the VFX team At some point, we're going to need to see what the salvage beam actually looks like in situ with what it looks like when we're burning away the EV2s on the ship too. So it is very early stages. Investigation, like tech investigation, being done by several teams that link into this, and then also very similarly to what we do with a lot of our design workers, we're in kind of working with the teams that work on the concept of the visuals to see what this looks like, whether it be UI or VFX or anything like that. So
I imagine we'll be following along with it as it develops, just as we will with Refuel, just as we are currently with like the Colonialism Outpost and everything. Be sure to stay tuned to Inside Star Citizen to see this feature as it progresses throughout the remainder
Things that have taken a while.
Johnny, that's it.
All right. So yeah, he said they were early. They were in early days. So that was 2 years before the feature came to the game. Now that feature was held up by PES, and it was expected to launch about 6 months earlier. So like, I don't know, early days, we've seen them say things about early days and they've taken 3 to 4 years to get it out. This was early days and they took about 1.5 years to get it out. So it could be all kinds of things, to be honest, but not something you want to hear. All right, so next up here, we start to get more into the actual development of all this stuff. So up until 2021, they were basically just talking about how everything is going to work. It wasn't really physicalized in the game. And then we just started to see these kind of short updates on some of the ships being made for it.
Version of a ship-based salvage. Moving to the next ship.
Okay, and that was that was it. That was the shortest update ever. So I guess that was like one of the first updates we got on this ship. Literally couldn't even. Let's move to the actual episode about the ship. Sorry about that.
The salvage feature is really trying to cater to people who want the diversity and exploration type gameplay.
Might find debris fields of a long lost battle, or on your discovery tour you find a destroyed ship.
I'm excited about players playing this and salvaging wrecks of ships in the PU.
So right now, when you destroy a ship, that's kind of it.
So that's where salvage comes in, where we sort of extend the life of the spaceship.
We want you to be able to find destroyed versions of these, look at them in ways you would never have seen them before, and have this extra gameplay with them.
There are different aspects of salvage that we want to introduce to the game, and the very first one that we will have is the hull scraping,
which is where you blast off the external surface of the ship and sell that material for profit.
Hull stripping right now is split into 2 parts. We have the FPS side, and you have the vehicle side.
So in vehicle hull scraping, this will be for the Vulture and the Reclaimer, where you take your great big salvage lasers and you take off as much of the material as you can.
For the Vulture, it's very easy. You are the only person. It's the lone wolf ship.
You can go out, explore, find wrecks just by yourself. Best catering to the smaller types of wrecks you would find.
In the Vulture, you activate the salvage mode, which then allows you to use the scraper beams to operate them over the surface area of the ship and gather the material. For the Reclaimer, we highly recommend you to come in a group.
You want probably at least 2 people to man the salvage lasers, and a few people in the back of the cargo bay to help you stash away your earnings. You'll go out, you'll find a wreck, turn on the great big front lights of the Reclaimer so you can see what you're doing, and the 2 people in the salvage turrets will start blasting away at the hull to strip it off. As that happens, you're gathering what we call RMC, recycled material composite material, which gets put into cargo boxes in the filler stations that are in the back of the Reclaimer. And you'll need someone back there to take these full crates out of the dispenser and stack them away on your cargo grid.
And once you have your cargo hold full, you fly to the station where you then can sell the commodity.
So that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. They don't give you the materials, they just give you this RMC material that replaces I guess everything specifically. It just gives you one material you can sell.
You just buy a Grey Cat multi-tool. You make sure that you buy the salvage attachment. You make sure that the salvage attachment is actually attached to the Grey Cat multi-tool. And this is the moment where you can scrape off any material that is salvageable right away.
We also want to allow you to use that material that you gain from hull scraping to immediately repair any damage your ship might have taken. This is really useful for people who are out dogfighting, perhaps. You shoot down your opponent, go out with your multi-tool, take the hull off
I
their
never
ship
use the
and put it back
multi-tool
on
for
yours to repair
the
damage.
salvaging.
You will see where on your own ship you have repaired. So you're kind of getting this battle scarring of your ship.
It's like the Bondo you guys are talking about.
So right now, both the FPS and ship's hull scraping has progressed very nicely, but there's still a long ways to go with regards to selling the material. We've got a lot of VFX and audio tweaks to do along the way. We want to fully refine the user experience. I'm really excited to see this feature hit the verse. I think it'll be great to watch everyone taking people's ships apart, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Didn't know you could salvage with a multi-tool. It's not really worth it. I mean, I'm sure it will be at some point, especially when you're at your last, like, you don't have much else going for you. You need to repair something. It'd be nice to have them, but the way that the system's set up right now, I don't think it's really worth it to do the hull scraping with your gun like that. This is getting, I think, more into the details of salvage again on the hull munching side, but we'll see what they have to say. This is from May 5th, so this is after we did get salvage. Let's see what's up here.
Obviously, salvage, you made its debut in 3.18 now. Yep. We're talking about it for so long, it's hard to... how's that going? How's the response to that been? Are you happy with it? Are you content with it? Or do you see nothing but the problems and where you want to go next? I invite you to be very candid in this. Tell me how you're seeing salvage right now after its release. Come on, Dan.
Oh, should I do it? I thought I'd leave this one to Torsten. Okay. This is his baby. He started this. He brought it to completion. I don't want to talk about it. From mining, I have a lot of things to say because I started it, and then Torsten is bringing it to completion. But for this one, I'd rather let Torsten.
Okay.
So the question was where we are at with it and how happy we are, and I'm really happy with what we have, and especially with the short time that we actually got to work on that. Like, I know you all have been waiting for it for quite some time, but actually the time frame it was thrown at us was quite short. So I'm really happy with what we pulled out, or what we achieved in that time frame. And I think I mentioned it already at some point, that what I like the most about the salvage that was introduced with 3.18, so the hull scraping, is that it is such a nice contrast to all the other gameplay loops that we have. Right? We have a very action-based combat, or we have an action-based combat. We have mining that is very now even more than before, but it is like challenging in terms of itemization planning and preparation and stuff like that. While hull scraping right now is you jump into your Vulture or into your Reclaimer, you drive past some debris pieces, and you can just put on some music and relax and just scrape off their hull. And I think that is this, like, I think good games are made out of those, like, a variety of systems that deliver on certain demands that you as the player have. Sometimes you might have had a rough day, so what you need is just sit back, relax, and I think hull scraping is the perfect loop for that. So I'm really happy with where we're at. And what I'm also proud of is that we managed to deliver our first glimpse of crafting So having that in there with a filler station is also a very nice thing to have.
Yeah,
So
Thorsten seems to always have some good things to say, and has a good head for this stuff, I guess. I like the stuff that he works on generally, and I like the way that he talks about the stuff too. He's very straightforward with it usually, and pretty descriptive. What else were they saying about Salvage here?
That's just you and your ship in the middle of nowhere, just hard scraping whatever you found. And I was like, no, it needs to be challenging. It needs to explode if you touch a wire or something like this. And we're like, no, just let's do it this way. And indeed, you need to have the variety. If everything explodes the second you do something wrong, you always have that tension. So it's nice to have the ups and downs. There will be chances for explosions and stuff like this with other gameplay, or maybe with other parts of Salvage. But yeah, it's nice to have a mix of everything. And I do have to add to what Thorsten just said, is like the team pulled off an amazing feature. There were a lot of dependencies on other team, and it came at a time when a lot of heavy tech was coming, and it kind of influenced the delivery, and they did an amazing job.
actually on that, before it's forgotten, because without the weapon feature team that did the pre-phase work and the VFX team that pulled out like the amazing damage map work that was required for that, we would be sitting here and talking about this. So like also like huge kudos to the weapon feature team and to the VFX team that really helped us achieve what we have now.
Yeah, if for backers who are used to mining and exploding and dying, you can send your letters to Dan Treffin.
That's me.
Care of Side Imperium Games.
Constantly exploding and dying, or just running into the side of a moon. You know how it is. All right, let's see what they have to say about this hull munching. This will be the last update we have, getting us up to date with whatever's coming tomorrow. So listen in.
In our future, talk to me about where we want to take munching. What's next for hull scraping? What can you tell us, Thorsten?
So hull scraping for now is, I want to say on a rest, but that's not entirely true because it will get touched while we are working right now on the munching aspect. So some improvements will come with our munching release.
Yay!
It will also affect the hull scraping part of it.
So we'll get hull scraping and hull munching updates in the same update. This is May, by the way. This is about 2 months ago, a little more. Almost 3 months ago now.
But yeah, so the next step for Salvage was what was released right now in 3.19, which is the item stripping. So that is already a huge step forward for the Salvage gameplay loop. And I think it was even one of the most requested, most waited for, however you want to phrase it, but like I personally am really happy about it because it ties in really nicely with all the features that we internally work on. So the synergy is really nice with like even with refueling in the end, because you can switch out your fuel pods. There are still things that we need to do there, right? So it was already called out in several points on Spectrum or in our community videos or in other channels, that there is still a lot of things that we need to do to make it work perfectly. We are aware, and we are working on that. But yeah, then the next big step, and I think that will be the most fun, and I'm personally looking forward the most to that, is actually the munching. So yeah, like every reclaimer owner will be happy to actually be able to use their claw at some point on any debris ship. And yeah, but not only is it important for those ship owners, but it's also important now with PES. So I think that is even more important than any gameplay right now. We need cleanup, and there's no better way to do cleanup than to gamify it and then like have it rewarding in the sense of, yeah, you destroy the ships. It's fun to destroy those ships or those debris pieces, and then you convert them into resources, and then you are either able to sell those for like just profit, or you use the resources you gather for crafting them coming in the very far future.
So this is one thing. This is an important it's not a shift in mentality. It's a good mentality that we've always had, but I think it shows, especially with PES. Yes, we filled up the universe with a lot of wrecks and a lot of junk, but what we're doing right now, we're starting to introduce the gameplay that's going to clean it up, and Munching is just one of these. We know there's a big mess happening on the space stations, on the landing zones, so we will be introducing systems that also will tackle that, but we don't want to just clean it up faster, just remove it and destroy basically PES. What we're going to do is involve the player, and
you don't want
so the location it's cleaning, then the players will have a chance to do that and get.
So they're talking about this idea that Salvage will help with cleanup, something that we've also talked about with like janitor work in cities, which they are working on. So that's all well and good, but like somebody said in chat, they still need to allow us to use tractor beams in armistice zones, which means they need to get better law and security systems. And you start to see how like certain things need to be updated to allow for other things. And we need to hear about the law system too. I think that's going to be important.
Will the hull basically be a blocker to performing Munching gameplay, or will you just get less RMC if you don't strip the hull first?
Yeah, on this one you will completely lose out on the RMC, because like, yeah, well, you will at least lose some bits, right? If you start the Munching process and that will break apart your ship, there will be like some hull material will get lost. So this is definitely some material loss that you will have there.
I'm sorry. Do we expect the Munching to provide RMC, or would it be like a different resource?
Yeah, well, so in our first iteration, the Munching will not provide RMC, but for later, once we have actually, because the explanation would take a bit longer, because what we actually need to have the proper materials is the physicalized materials that like each component the ship made of is aware of which material it is made of, right? So if you break apart a ship, the piece exactly knows what it is made of, and then you munch it, and then you actually get the exact components what it was made of. This is something that is more complicated to do than what we are currently working on. Currently, we will be working on something that is more like it converts it to a dedicated or defined mix of materials. So we don't know yet what the actual part is made of, but that will then come once the physicalized materials will come in. So with that, we don't plan to have RMC being part of that, because we want to leave it like exclusive to the hull scraping. But
there's our answer. From earlier, we were talking about will it take the material away from the salvage job? Hull munching will always, or hull scraping will always be RMC, it sounds like. Hull munching will take away from that, but you will get the normal materials from hull munching. So good clarification there. So that's kind of the last little update. I think the big takeaways here are from 2015 with this design post, talking about taking out components, talking about hull stripping, and some of this other stuff that obviously is coming more with repair gameplay than salvage, to all of these videos where they talked about the drones. Well, we haven't actually seen drones, but the hull munching, the hull stripping, all of the details that they've shared throughout all these years are consistent. And they've finally gotten to this place where it's in-game. It came in-game with 3.18. Surprisingly, really caught me off guard. The very next patch, they dropped in physicalized components for the more updated ships. Honestly, more about the tech than the feature itself. I'm really glad that they got that into the game. As you can see from this review, that was kind of a blocker for a lot of things, so that's been good. We're going to see hull munching tomorrow, and we know that engineering is starting to enable life support, oxygen transfer between ships, which should allow for siphoning. So the different work between all of the salvage gameplay that they're planning has definitely taken some real steps forward over the last year, and it sounds like we're going to get something good to watch tomorrow with the prototype that hopefully isn't going to be too far away in the game, but setting myself up for that.